Hi everybody, this is Brooke Bacon. I just wanted to let you know that our webcast will be starting shortly. We are just going to give you a brief overview of GSI while you wait. So who is GSI? GSI is a full-service consulting and managed services organization with deep application and industry knowledge. This deep knowledge allows us to develop advanced AI and automation that delivers cutting-edge intelligence. This unmatched intelligence is what enables our clients to thrive and not just survive. So why partner with GSI? GSI is a full-service ERP, SaaS, cloud, ITSM, cybersecurity reseller, consulting, and managed services organization. We have industry, application, and technical certifications, and we not only understand the business system you are utilizing, but most importantly, the industry. Advanced AI and automation are used in all of our products and services to help our clients reduce TCO and increase ROI. We have offices nationwide and partners worldwide, which allows us to offer a 24/7 global support model. And we are the only partner you will find in the industry that has a 100% guarantee on everything we do. Here are a few of the awards and accreditations and certifications we have received. Our mission is to make every customer a client. To accomplish this mission, we create a culture that attracts and retains the most creative, energetic, and experienced professionals. Here are some of the products that we have developed to help our clients thrive. Genius AI is a platform designed to support the development and execution of customized modules for system monitoring, application monitoring, AI, and automation. Modules can be developed and executed for almost any business system. Our clients use Genesis Performance Optimizer to model, measure, and maximize system performance for all of their web-based business systems. Genome is our newest product that will detect, analyze, and automate the process of converting customizations into orchestrations. Rapid Reconciler is our tool that reconciles perpetual, in-transit, and received not vouchered inventory. Rapid Approval is an application for quickly processing workflow approval requests in Salesforce. And G Shield is a line of security products that we are continuing to expand. Currently, we have two products, JDE Password Reset and JDE Two-Factor Authentication. As you can see from these testimonials, our clients attest to the fact that we focus on the business value of their systems, not just the performance. This business value focus allows our clients to transform antiquated systems of record into market share expansion machines.
Thank you, Brooke, and thank you, everyone. Welcome to the presentation today. My name is Kyle Gray, I'm Manager of Security and Fraud, and we will be discussing some tips and tricks, how to manage JDE Security, Toolset or not. Right, take a look at our agenda today. We'll kind of recap, go through some of the main Security 101 type functionalities, define it, look at the hierarchy, those types of things, give us a general background of security, JDE Security. We'll look at some of the best practices for the industry. We'll take a look at the different security models, open versus closed, in more detail. We'll look at the role models, process-based versus job-based. And we will look at combating some security issues, more precisely role sequencing issues, using a tool set and not using a tool set, how to do that, and the difference makers having a tool set can provide for you. And then lastly, we'll look at some compliance concerns and ways that you can combat compliance as well. All right, moving on into Security 101 and Foundations. What is JDE Security? So I'm sure if we're in here, if we're some sort of IT administrator, security official, CNC of some sort, we understand JDE Security, but it's the use of our applications, our UBEs, and data to grant our user base JDE access. Having security in place enables an administrator to control access for individual users and for groups of users. Setting up security correctly ensures that users in the system have permission to perform only those actions that are essential to their completion of their jobs. So having it set up properly, you're not allowing users to inherit access that they don't need in the system that could potentially harm the business should they perform a transaction that they should not. And security can be applied at the user, role, and or star public level for any application, UBE, and table in the system. Looking at what I just mentioned, the security hierarchy here, it starts with user, role, then star public, just like I mentioned. So anything assigned at the user level is going to trump anything that is found at a role or star public level. And for that matter, what this hierarchy means is that when a user is in the system, and for instance, I'm in the system and I'm in AP and I go try and click on voucher entry, which is PO411, it's going to look at anything assigned at my user level. Is there a record for PO411 for K Gray out there that says he can get into this application? Typically, in a best practice model, you're not going to find it at the user level. You would find it at a role level. And you see two little sections of our hierarchy here. It's because role sequencing comes in. We're going to talk about this later and how to combat it, but role sequencing is once it finds a record for what you're trying to do. So for instance, PO411, I'm trying to click on voucher entry. If it finds it within one of my roles that says, yes, you can access this, then I'm able to get in and access it. If it finds where it says, no, you're not able to, then obviously I'm not able to get into that application. I'll receive an error. If nothing is found at the user level, no roles assigned to my user ID, grant PO411, it will go down to the most basic form of security, star public. If there's nothing there, then I still will not be granted access to it. Star public, well, we'll get into that in a second. But from a hierarchy standpoint, user, role, star public is pretty much all we need to know. The next few slides, we're going to get into some of our main security types. We're going to bounce around between our numbers. Me being JDE or Oracle person back in the day, I might have restructured them a little, but it is what it is. Type 3, which I would consider type 1, but besides the point, type 3 application security. All this is saying is, can your users click on and enter the application or UBE or report that they are trying to enter? So going back to my example of voucher entry, for instance, let's take just the top one here, P0000, system setup. I'm trying to click on that and I have 04 VCHENT, the voucher entry role assigned to K Gray. I'm trying to click on this system setup application right here. Based on what this diagram shows me and what is set up in the security workbench here, yes, I will be able to see the run, or I have run and install security, and I will be able to get into that application. It's as simple as that for application security. Can I get into it? The reporter application. Not what can I do in there yet. That takes us to our next one, which is action security, type 1. Once you are in the application, and notice that I don't mention anything of UBEs here, once I am in the application, what can I do? So, for instance, 04 VCH again, we use a different application, PO411, right here, fourth line. It's saying once I get into PO411, I have full capabilities. Yes, I can add, yes, change, yes, delete, okay, copy and scroll, all yeses. So I have full rights there. You obviously have the ability to not give them full rights. We'll discuss more of what these records look like in the presentation, but changing those and using especially these two types of security, because type 3 and type 1, application and action, are the premise of what your users can do in the system. There are some other types of security we're going to cover, but these two right here are the most important. If those are set up properly, then your users, they do not have more access than they need, and they should only have the access that they need to do their job functions. All right, so we're going to keep going down some of the other, just about 3 more types here, but they are pretty crucial and play a big part in JDE security. But type 5, data selection and processing option. This does pertain to a UBE and not an application. I put some of these in here. So this is a custom master role here, and this is another screenshot of the security workbench. The first 3 are applications, and you can see that there's no values out here by prompt for data selection, full access, modify data selection, and so on. That means because there is no data selection for applications, they're only set up, and processing options are only set up for UBEs. So look at the bottom 2 that I have circled here. What this is saying is for this role, for UBE R01050, we have set that it will not prompt for values, it will not prompt for data selection, it will not give you full access to it, it will not allow you to modify. but it is going to allow you to prompt for versions. So what this tells me is that we've got versions specified with the particular data selection already coded to them. So we allow users who have customer master to prompt for a version. So when they click on R01050, it is going to give them the list of versions. They know which version to run based on what they're trying to, what output they're trying to get. So again, type 5, it's fairly crucial depending on how your users are running your reports, updatable reports. If they change the data selection, change companies, all the processing options, they can run the report incorrectly. And again, if it's updatable, that could cause pretty big problems in the system. So another fairly big security type 5 data selection and processing option. The big one, as I would call it, the big one, the beast, the fickle beast, is row security. It is still very important, and before we get into what actually records look like, there are two modes here for row security in JD Edwards. It is row security mode is shipped default exclusive. Recommended best practice is inclusive, and we'll talk about why in a minute. So you can either be inclusive or exclusive. Here you can see in our lab, we are inclusive mode, and which means you need to include the value or the range of values that you want your users to be able to see and work with. Exclusive mode is the opposite, which means you need to deny with no records the values or range of values that you do not want your users to see. That being said, the reason inclusive mode is recommended is because it cuts down on the number of security records needed for the most part when it comes to overall records in your security workbench, but more importantly, the records that could be confusing when it comes to data security. A user could be working in performing a process that needs to have access to this MCU, but it's not set up in this particular role, but he has this one of these roles assigned. So again, it is best to have inclusive. You're telling your users, yes, this is what I want you to see, versus denying what you don't want them to see. And what does that look like in terms of our records in the system? So you can see here, again, we define, you can do other aliases, but the main aliases we're focusing on today, MCU and CO, so business unit and company. For instance, this A Separati here in the first line green arrow, we are allowing a specific range of data that this user can work with when in the FO901. So A Separati, when in FO901, we are saying MCU value 01284 to 01284, you have full capabilities. Next line, same user, A Separati, same table, FO901. We give them a new range, 01804, 01804. So those are exact ranges, not value ranges. We're telling that user in that table you can access these two business units only. Going down here to the red arrow, which is user BIPOC, same table, FO901, but we've given this user a range. We're saying between range 03010 and 03398, you have full access to any of the business units that are in there. So instead of having to label them out one by one, we give them a full range because we as the company have deemed that being okay. So in the high level, most generic form of row security, that's how it works. There are presentations already out there, and there will probably be some more coming out, specifically from GSI2, dedicated to row security. So if you want to go find them, reach out to us. We'll be glad to give you those. But row security requires its own hour to be discussed. So again, from a high level, this is where it works, or how it works. Inclusive mode, we grant our yeses, and we either give an exact MC or exact range or an exact value. All right, and the last security type is type 2 column security. It's come about, I would say more prevalent anyway in the last, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years, especially with my experience in the industry. It does not have anything to do with the user getting into the application or how they can use the application when they're in it. it is simply masking columns or certain pieces of data inside the application. So it's not action security. You cannot add, change, delete the data. It sort of is, but it's not. This is saying, and here's our for instance, when I am in P01012 address book, our left example here, same address book number 3040522, mailing name is Gray/Kyle, and we have our address line 1. Here's our address. We have applied column security on the roll over here on our right screenshot. Again, you can see same address number 3040522, same mailing name, but address line 1 is gone where it says city here. It's gone. It's not editable. It's not viewable. We are saying you are not allowed to change mailing addresses for any address book record out there. That's a very base example, but that as you can see, thinking about postings and entering vouchers, journals, editing, where there is any type of address book pertinent data, data privacy type data, tax IDs, those sorts of things, those need to be masked. And this is one way anyway of taking care of that. So another not as crucial as our type 1, type 3, and type 4, but still a very useful security type in JDE. Let's take a look at some of our security best practices from the industry standpoint now. I'm just going to stay on this one slide, and we'll kind of talk about them, and then we will detail a few of these more in depth here in the next few slides. So, industry best practices. First and foremost, operate in a closed security model. We'll discuss what that means in depth in a minute and show you what the records look like and so on. But what it from a high level means is you have accountability for all of your applications and UBEs in your system. If you're in a closed system, you know that a user must be granted either a role or at the user level access before they can get into an application or UBE. They're not inheriting any access from being in an open system, a non-lockdown, non-closed system. Number 2, utilize process-based roles, not job-based. Again, we will discuss these in length in a minute. Process-based roles, they provide more of a streamlined and maintainable role structure. And they give you the flexibility of segregation of duties in your security model. Where job-based, for the most part, 99.9% of the time when I say that, they do not. Or they still can allow it, but they make it extremely difficult to manage. 3, only grant users the access they need. So that kind of ties into our process-based roles. Do you have your process broken out? Do you have the ability to only grant users the access they need, instead of granting a role that has a plethora of access and users are getting 7 or 8 different processes when really they only need 2 to 3. Go with a process-based driven task view as well. So process-based roles should tie into your process-based tasks. We'll get it to in a minute. Have task view clear and concise, broken down by module and by your processes. And then lastly, reporting capabilities. Be in a position, so whether you have a security tool or not, again, we will talk about it here coming up, be in a position to send data via report or data extracts, so manually, to auditors with confidence, whether publicly traded or private. If auditors are not breathing down your neck asking for this, you still should be in a position to know that you are in a compliant, a segregation of duties model that is an industry standard. Let's take a little bit deeper look into some of our best practices that we just mentioned. So security model open versus closed. First off, that security open versus closed model deals with strictly star public, star all. So star public is not a role. Although it is considered a phantom role, you cannot be assigned to anyone. You do not go into P95921 or the role relationships in a security tool and assign star public to a user. Star public is the baseline security for the system. So anything assigned at star public is granted to everyone or denied to everyone in the system. At that point, they need a record either at their user or a role level to override what is at star public. So what does the star public record look like? Or what we use star public star all for type 1 and 3, application and action security. That's the open versus closed. And some of the other records that would be at Star Public are your search and select applications. So for instance, PO1012 address book. I believe it's the P0111S or PO101S is the search and select in the address book. The little magnifying glass button in the grids. You click on that and that brings up a screen where you're able to search and help you filter. That is all predefined data. You're not, now again, 99.9, you're not allowed to edit, change, delete, add any of data in a search and select. It is simply just searching and selecting instead of having to remember. It's like a library. Think of it that way, but you're not able to do anything with it. So all of those programs, they can be at Star Public. They should be, because if you have to put them in your roles, people that have the roles and they get to address book, from an inquiry standpoint, but you didn't cover the search and selects and the inquiry role, well, they're not going to be able to use the search and select. So again, at Star Public is no harm. Any general inquiry applications, so any applications that are either hard-coded to be inquiry only or that you've deemed to be okay to hand out to the business from an inquiry only standpoint. Go ahead and put those at Star Public. It just negates any issues or any need for additional roles to be assigned to users that could creep up on the role limit for users as well. And then generic applications or UBEs. So for instance, the P98305W, if you do not have that at Star Public or within your role makeup, so there's no security assigned to it, then you are going to have a mass problem with users trying to submit UBEs, because that's the submittal screen, printer selection screen. So users will be able to click on your UBEs, and when they go to click submit, there will be no printer screen and the UBE will not submit. So again, generic, but yet crucial, I guess, if you will, applications, put those at Star Public so that you don't have any underlying issues like that really shouldn't come about. And one thing to note here in our red, you really should not be controlling security through Star Public. It should be through roles or at the user level, mainly through roles. All right, so what is an open versus closed model? Open model is Star Public, Star All is set to. Type 3 is yes, yes. And type 1 action security, add, change, delete, OK, copy, scroll is all yeses. Or there's no record at all. Because remember, JDE out of the box vanilla is wide open. So you must have over here, and to create the closed model, you must have the records of, for Star Public, Star All, type 3 and type 1 of no, so meaning type 3 application, can you run and install it? No, not unless I've assigned it at your user or assigned a role to you that grants access to it. Type 1, same thing. No, you cannot add. No, you cannot change. No, you cannot delete. We'll let you okay in there if you're in a voucher entry screen and you need to inquire and open up the record. Okay, you can click OK. No, you can't copy it. And yes, you can scroll if there's multiple records that you need to scroll through. So in a closed security model, you are locking down, like I said before, you're locking down all of your applications that are not being granted or locked down within roles. You're catching everything else in the background that could be inherited access to users or roles in the system. Here's what the records look like in the systems, just so you can see what from the security workbench. So in an open model, again, you either see these two records, so type 1, all yeses, type 3, yes, yes, or you do not see these records at all. If those two things are prevalent in your system, then you're in an open system. As simple as that. Security model for open. You have the needed no, yes for action security, and you have the needed no and no for run and install type 3 application security. So, and this, remember, this does not. So if there's no records here, you're open. These, to be in a closed, you must see these two records in the system. And lastly, let's look at some pros and cons as it relates to open versus closed security model. So in an open model, pros, well, you'll have limited or no access issues with your users. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, because they're going to have wide variety of access in your system. But it is a pro, because you're not getting tickets submitted saying, hey, I can't access this. I can't run this report. I can't run this application. I can't change here. Well, because you're not locked down, you're just granting them everything. The other pros, not trying to be funny, I just couldn't really think of any more, to be honest. Cons, users have an abundance of access above and beyond what they should. They almost have sysadmin-like access unless you're locking down applications within your roles, which you may do some of the main applications that you know of, but there are hundreds, if not a couple thousand of applications in the system that would need to be locked down, and that would need to be in every role if it's not at Star Public. So the likelihood of that being done, and I've seen it in past projects and past clients, it's just not feasible to catch all of the applications. So there's still inherited access in an open model, even if you've done a good job of trying to secure everything. It's difficult to manage access. User may have potential to create fraudulent behavior without management IT knowing. I mean, it's not showing up in a role, so you'd have to be able to run a report, which there are no reports in Base Jde that would show you this, but what a user technically has access to, whether they're going and clicking on it or fast pathing to it, favoriting, or however they're getting to it, that doesn't necessarily matter, especially in the eyes of auditors. They care, do they have security access to it? Does the security workbench say they can access it? And lastly, it's impossible, or almost, to adhere to best practice and auditor standards. I mean, segregation of duties, which we'll talk to in a little bit. I mean, you're chasing your tail, for the lack of better words. It's a merry-go-round to try and be compliant in an open model. It's almost impossible. In a closed security model, pros, users have access to explicitly what is granted to them. So no extra access is possible. It's only what's at their user and only what is at their or granted at the role level. This follows best practice and auditor guidelines. It prevents or lessens chance, anyway, of fraudulent behaviors from your users. Meaning you have to grant them that access. You have to grant a role. You have to grant it at the user level. Something has to be done to grant a user access in a closed security model. So at that point, then if they're able to, perform fraudulent behavior, then it needs to be looked at on how they're doing it and what access is being granted to them. And last pro is more streamlined and easier to manage access for IT and business. Cons, cannot think of one. Maybe that your role count goes up, to be honest, but the maintenance on your roles are almost non-existent because you would be in a better model, and so on. So really no pro or no cons that you can think of to be in a closed model. All right, so just a quick poll. For those of us in the room here, you can just kind of nod your head, raise your hand, shrug your shoulders if you don't know. But those of us listening to the recording here, just think to yourself. But is your Jde, based on everything we just said, the open versus closed model, how that is derived, and how it's implemented? Are you in a closed or open model? So think about that, and if you are in an open model, then we'll talk about what you need to do or what you can do to close it. I would not recommend just going and entering that security record for Star Public Star All, because it will, that hits the system. Star Public hits the system for everyone immediately. So it needs to be vetted, needs to be thought out, needs to be planned. But it's just something to think about. What model am I in? Am I open or am I closed? Okay. We talked about security model and security types and those sorts of things, how they interact, how they work. Now let's talk about our role models. So how we are granting our users to our access, or our access to our users, excuse me. Process-based versus job-based. Job-based roles, pros, you have a less count of roles in the system, and it's less count for management and IT to grant to users. The cons, you got typically, especially over time, you've got convoluted security within the roles. So you've got accumulated security records over time. You didn't know how to fix an issue that was coming up, and it was an AP staff role, and they needed address book full access, so you just added it to the AP staff role. Well, that should have been granted through a different role, a different process. But to solve your problem, you granted it to that role. No problem. At the time, anyway. Think about that. That's just one application. Think about any other access request issues. fixes of that nature, assigning to the user level, assigning to your role, getting it convoluted, it presents role sequencing issues, and that's one of the security issues we're going to cover here in a little bit. But role sequencing issues are very prevalent in job-based models. We see that a lot, and they can be very difficult depending on how convoluted it is and what the role makeup is and how many roles you have assigned. It can be very difficult to solve, and we'll actually get into a couple of the exercises or examples of as to why. It's definitely difficult to track and adhere to SOD standards. Again, it's almost impossible because your roles have so much access. And it's definitely not industry best practice. So examples of those types of roles, what they would look like in a system would be AP staff, AP accountant, AP manager, CFO, general accountant, controller, those types of things. So they are centered around a job title, not a process. So shift over to our right, process-based roles. Pros, roles are not convoluted with access across multiple modules or processes. Easier for management IT to control and distribute access. Basically, you're granting a role with single process versus a role with multiple processes in it. So for instance, I'm granting you voucher entry, 04 VCHENT down here. I'm not granting payment process and voucher post and other 1099 processing. I know this role right here only grants voucher entry access, and we'll discuss that in a minute too. You do have the ability to effectively track segregation of duties, and you conform to industry standards and best practices. Cons, there are more roles to maintain. You break your processes down, and so instead of an AP staff over here where there's 7 processes lumped in there, you've got 7 roles in a process-based model. It's not that big of a deal. Again, if you think about it, you hand a process to a user. If a user enters vouchers, you hand them voucher entry role. If they post the vouchers but don't enter the vouchers, you give them the 04 VCH post role, and you don't have to give them voucher entry. So again, you're segregating your processes, your duties, SOD, out so that it's manageable and distributable to your users. All right, continuing on. Tying into our process-based role model is the use of a process-based task view. So in our GSI security projects and all-out security projects, and we'll talk about all-out here in a little bit too, we tie them directly to one another. And this is for conformity, for maintenance purposes, and for the flow, the general flow of your security and role model. So a process-based task view, only the applications and UBEs that directly relate to that module and that process should be within that portion of the menu. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. So here we have a Solution Explorer, it's a fat client look of a menu in JD Edwards, a task view. You have modules, address book, accounts payable, general accounting, land, purchasing, construction, sales, marketing, customer care. Within these modules, you have your processes or your roles. So as mentioned on our previous slide, let's go up a slide, 04 VCHENT, which is our voucher entry, would be pointed to this folder right here, accounts payable, voucher entry. And voucher entry over on our right only has access to voucher entry applications. So here's our speed voucher entry and standard voucher entry. And then there's some other voucher entry methods that this company uses, which is okay, but they're still voucher entry. There's nothing to do with posting. There's no 1099. There's no period month-end closing activities. There's no supplier maintenance in here. It is, your task view is broken down by processes just like your roles are. Flowing into that, you can use something called fine cut with your task view. Fine cut is applied, it can be applied to the user, but really should be in best practice recommended applied to your roles. So we're going to use the general accounting example here. Same menu structure we just looked at, but using fine cut, you're able to filter on a role. So right here we have general accounting, journal entry, and you can see these red marks and these green marks. I have defined in Solution Explorer, the FAT client, what I want this role to be able to see on the menu. So if I only have this role assigned to me, journal entry, the 09 JRN-ENT role assigned to K Gray in JD Edwards, that's it. That's all I do is journal entries, for instance. The only thing I'm going to see when I log in is main menu, general accounting, journal entry, and the applications that are under it. I will not see anything else on our menu. A lot of outdated or security models that haven't been changed or edited or revamped in a long time, they just grant full access. So yes, the journal entry role, if they've got their roles broken down by process, it may only grant access to these applications here, but they still allow them to see all of the other folders and potentially applications under those folders. So it's just unneeded. It really it provides for a better end user experience, for one. And something to note is just it is not considered security. It's an added layer. So just because they can't see it on the menu does not mean that the security record is not there in the security workbench. That's where tying your roles into your process-based task view is critical. So I know that journal entry here is only granting journal entry applications in UBEs, and it's only accessing the journal entry portion of general accounting menu. So that's the premise behind FindCut. Very, very useful tool, but you have to be in a position to use that because, again, think about job-based, where we've got a controller or a general accountant. They may have journal entry, job-based role. They may have journal posts, they may have the inquiries, they may have the reimbursement, all lumped under that one role. So if you hide any of the folders where their applications are that the role says they should be able to access, well, then they're not going to be able to access them from the menu anyway. So it can get very dicey and very messy if you're trying to fine cut a job-based role model. So again, process-based. Okay, so we're going to look at combating some security issues using a tool set and not using a tool set. First off, a tool set, I mentioned a little bit ago, there are a couple out there. Today's focus is going to be on All Out Security. The other one out there is QSoft. What is All Out Security? All Out is the most powerful set of risk, security, audit, and compliance tools specifically for the JD Edwards market. It was developed to combat issues JDE users were facing as a result of SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley. Originally designed for SOX reporting, it did expand to incorporate functionality for CNC folks, application leads, auditors, and more specifically and more importantly, and at least in my world, security officers. They do have 6 separate modules, each with their own capabilities and functionality within JD Edwards. I'm going to start with the bottom and go up because we're going to touch on some of the stuff that's in Combi roles coming up. So Profile Plus, that is basically creating, editing, deleting, maintaining, if you will, all your roles and all your users in your system. So anything to do with passwords, creating the role, role sequencing if that's an issue, environments, all of that, that's Profile Plus. Menu Plus, exactly like it says, and this is probably one of my favorite modules because it adds the time and money value add that a tool like All Out, at least, and just minimally, I mean, all of these are fantastic, but the menu portion is just night and day. I mean, think about if you guys have ever created a menu or had to make just menu changes using regular Solution Explorer or JDE functionality, it's a process. Whereas Menu Plus, you can format it in a spreadsheet to fit the uploadable grid that All Out has and simply copy and paste it. It gets the folder depths correct. It gets their task IDs. You can preset the task ID to your company. So GSI 001 is the first line I upload. Every line after that, GSI 0002, so on and so forth. It streamlines everything, and other than formatting the spreadsheet, which takes maybe a couple hours as long as you have your modules and processes broken out, you simply upload it in less than an hour. And you have a brand new task view with hundreds, if not thousands of lines, depending on how extensively you use JDE, that you've just implemented. Whereas that would take you weeks of effort to get that created. Base Jde. Security Plus, maintaining security. It gives you different looks. Other than Security Workbench, it also gives you the regular Security Workbench, but the AOS Security Plus Workbench, it gives you the ability to work in a grid. So you do not have to go to form setup and to pick your type of security. You get an interactive grid that you can edit, change, add, delete, whatever you need to do as it comes in related to security. It's fantastic. Risk reporting, risk management has to do with segregation of duties, access management, audit requirements, reporting, those types of things. Won't touch too much other than SOD on that today, but and then finally combi roles. The one thing we're going to talk about today and the issue we're going to look at is role sequencing. It's one of the main ones that come about in JD Edwards security. There are a few others, and in another presentation we may dedicate a whole section to security issues. But the main one, role sequencing, all-out security created something called the fix merge, and that comes with the combi roles module. The fix merge is a glorious report that allows you, by the click of a button, to solve role sequencing issues for any user out there. It's fantastic. Let's take a little bit deeper look. Okay. Combating security issues, no tool set. So we're going to stick with role sequencing, but let's get away from all-out security real quick, and let's say we don't have the tool set, we're just using Base Jde. You have some options on how to solve this issue that we're looking at down here. So role sequencing is brought on by conflicting records within multiple roles. So for instance, look down here. We've got journal entry, 09 journal entry, and 09 GL post. Same application, P0911, P0911, and this role, journal entry, we give full access. You would expect that. It's the journal entry programs, journal entry role, they should have full access. In the journal post role, we don't need them to have full access to journal entries. We just want them to have inquiry so they can look in there. Here's where role sequencing comes in. See this column here where it says role sequence. GL post has 985. Role sequence for journal entry is 505. This role sequence is higher than our journal entry, meaning in Base Jde, this user would get what level of security? For those in the room, hopefully we answered, and not in the room, hopefully we answered the GL post, which is inquiry only. But the problem is he has the journal entry and he needs to enter journals. He needs to add them. What can we do? Option 1, remove role with incorrect security. So remove the post role. That solves the problem. Now it lets journal entry dictate what his security is for P0911. But the problem with that is the user still needs to post. That's part of his capabilities too. So now we've taken the one function away so that he can do another function, but to post, we're going to have to add it back. And once we add it back, then he's not going to be able to do journal entry again. See the little merry-go-round starting to form? Option 2, remove incorrect security record from 09 post. So 09 GL post, go ahead and remove the record for the inquiry record here. Well, you can do that. It depends on what model you're in. If you're in an open model and you remove this, now you're granting full access again, which is fine because that's what you want. But in a GL post role, you don't want them having full access to journal entries. They shouldn't. From a segregation of duties standpoint, they should not. So that really doesn't solve our issue either. Option 3, change sequence number of role with correct security. So for instance, change this sequence number for 09 journal entry to be higher than 09 journal post. The problem with that is now anybody that has both of these roles assigned, they're going to have full access to P0911. Option 4. And, sorry, go back to option 3. You change role sequencing numbers. You don't know, whoever else has these roles assigned, you don't know how you just affected their security because there's other security records in these roles. And now that we're saying, okay, well, this is going to be a higher sequence number than this one, we don't know unless you have some reporting capabilities or you're getting tickets submitted to say, hey, and now I can't do this, what issues you've caused. That's the very tedious and cautious thing about changing role sequence numbers, and honestly why we don't recommend doing that to solve these types of issues. Option 4 is create an entire new role with the correct security records to assign to this one user. So as you can see, there are options. You can always solve your issues. You can even enter a user level record to override the role. But then you get into a messy security makeup. You're adding records to solve problems, but you're not really you're just putting a band-aid on it. You're solving it for the one user. You're not solving it for them all. Or you change the role sequencing number and you solved it for that one user or that small group of users, but what did we cause a conflict elsewhere in those two roles makeup now that we've switched them? So it can create a very trickle down effect that could be spiraling and very difficult, time consuming, hours chewed up to solve. Okay, combating security issues. Toolset, so all-out security. Sticking with role sequencing. So again, it's still, you've got conflicting records within multiple roles. That doesn't change. That's what dictates a role sequence issue. Option 1, use the fixed merge. You don't see any other options on here. I mean, you can do the other options. You can always do those, whether you use AOS or whether you don't. Option 1 here is fixed merge. You only have that option if you run all-out, or if you have all-out security. What does the fixed merge mean? It means yes wins. So if you have a role that says no, add, change, delete, and another role for the same application assigned to you that says yes, 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 all out and industry standards deem it or have created this report to say, okay, you've got a role that's assigned to you that says yes, you have full access. That means your company or your administrators are granting you this access. And I understand that you now have a sequencing issue and you can't change sequence numbers. You don't want to create new roles. So we created a report that says yes wins. It's going to go out and look for any conflicting records. So look at this is a screenshot of fixed merge output. So sticking with our example on the previous slide, PO911 journal entries. Here's the two roles, GO post, it says inquiry only, and it says, or actually it says no run and install and inquiry only access action security. And journal entry is full access. But GO post has the higher sequence number. Remember that and why it shows up here. If you look over here, what it does is this C means combined. It writes a record at the user level. It's done by a UBE, so this is not manual. Writes a record at the user level and picks up the all yeses. So you do not have to change sequence numbers. You do not have to create a new role. You do not have to change security within your roles so that your user can do the functions they need. You do not have to worry about messing up other users in the system by changing the security or the sequencing roles. And you do not have to remove roles from users to solve sequencing issues. You simply run the fixed merge. It creates a user level record, and I know we said records should be controlled at the role level, but fixed merge, it does it with a UBE. So it's done automatically, it's not done manually, and it's done to solve for a specific user. So if there are 8 users that have this exact issue, we would run the fixed merge over all 8 of these users. It would have no effect on their access whatsoever, other than granting them the access that they should have. All right. Compliance. Let's take a look at compliance and what it means and relates to JDE. First, let's define it. So GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. Governance consists of a set of processes, customs, policies, laws, and institutions affecting the way people direct, administer, or control a corporation. So what are your laws? What are your guidelines that you have to follow? Risk management, the identification, evaluation, and prioritization of risks, followed by coordinated and economical application of resources to minimize, monitor, and control the probability of or impact of unfortunate events. So that is, how are you able to maintain or manage the risk within your access for your users in your security model? Compliance, conforming to a rule such as a specification, policy, standard, or law. Are you compliant? Are you complying to the governance that has been put on you? And what does it mean? That is in general business terms. What does it mean in JDE terms? Basically, segregation of duties, SOD. That being said, you've heard the term SOD, segregation of duties. I've thrown it out a few times. What is segregation of duties? What is it, or define it? It is a basic building block of sustainable risk management and internal controls for a business. The principle of SOD is based on shared responsibilities of a key process that disperses the critical functions of that process to more than one person or department. Without this separation in key processes, fraud or error risks are far less manageable. So for instance, look at our diagram down here. You got 4 different people. It doesn't have to be, but we're just extra segregated here. Person A gets to write the PO, but person A does not approve the PO. Person B does that, but person B does not also write the PO. Those two they're segregated. The approve the invoice once the PO is approved is done by another person too. So you can see, and then signing, cutting, payment approval, the check, everything is done as well separately. Again, this is done down to a 4-person level. Most companies don't have that flexibility for this one process, but the point would be you can't write and approve the PO. Now you can write the PO and then come over here and probably sign the check because you didn't do the approving, but any way, shape, or form, you've got to split the overall process up to the individual tasks within that process to then hand them out to be segregated. What does segregation of duties look like with Base Jde? Honestly, with no security tool, it's almost impossible. I say almost because it's not. Nothing's impossible, but I don't know anyone that has successfully and continually taken on an effort to become segregation of duties compliant without a tool set. I can say that confidently. There was a client that had a custom SOD matrix built outside. It was pretty impressive, to be honest, but it still had some gaps. And more importantly, it was manual maintenance and manual efforts to do all of this still. So what you must have to even think about being SOD compliant in Base Jde is, first and foremost, you have to have a closed security model. If you don't, you might as well just forget it. An open security model, you'll chase your tail for years, and you probably will still never be able to give auditors what they want. Secondly, it would help, and it would strongly, to have process-based role model. Don't have all your access, in a single role or lumped into job-based roles. Break out your processes. You must have a vast knowledge of SOD standards and how they relate to JDE access. Because if you don't, you can't create the SOD matrix and do the work on the back end. You just can't. You have to have custom or manually developed SOD matrix. Again, having that vast knowledge, you got to be able to come up with a matrix of what processes conflict or present an SOD problem with each other. You have to have custom reporting or manual effort spreadsheet work outside of JDE. Like I said, there's nothing inside JDE without a tool set that you can do segregation of duties wise. And lastly, you have to have manual documents or manually manipulated documents for auditors, which they typically do not like. You can swear it up and down the book. You can take the lie detector test, but unfortunately, when it comes to, again, not all, but 99% of the time, when it comes to auditors and audit requests and audit reports, they're looking for concrete report-driven output, not user-derived manipulatable documents. So again, it's not impossible, but it almost is impossible. And what does it look like with a tool set? Well, preferably you need to have a closed security model, and preferably you need to have process-based role model. With the tool set, you still can adhere to segregation of duties compliance standards. It just may be a bit difficult if you don't have those, a bit more difficult if you don't have those. What you have, or what you get with AOS, is you get that vast knowledge of SOD standards and how they relate to JDE access. You aren't having to figure it out on your own or research on your own. AOS gives you the tools to be successful, and the knowledge transfer in their guides and their tutorials, white papers on their websites to be successful. The industry standard SOD matrix. So they've come up with the mapping of what processes cause a problem with the other processes to therefore be in violation of a segregation of duties rule. So more, and Continuing, custom SOD and access reporting. So you have the matrix, you upload the matrix, and now you're able to run already developed reports by AOS, industry standard, industry accepted, best practice reports that can either be reported to Excel, but again, that's a manipulatable document, or to PDF. Either way, you're getting output from the system, not from VLOOKUPs and all kinds of formulas in an Excel spreadsheet. And lastly, what I just mentioned is the concrete reports and documents you get to send and provide to your auditors. These documents now say, this is what's in our system. This is where our problems are. Here's where we're monitoring them. Here's how we're controlling and reporting on them. And this is concrete. This is uneditable, unmanipulatable. This is from the report in JDE. Here's the submission, and here's the output. Okay, so what is segregation of duties? We've defined it, but let's define it in the terms of AOS. So each business process, or each role, if you're in a process-based role model, is broken out into a list. Two lists or two process-based roles make up an SOD rule. Stick with me. Users are in violation when they have access to the defined lists / business processes. So let's take a look at our example here. Rule 04A, 04E. I'll come back to it in a second. 04A is a list. You can see here, diagram, 04A, and that list or that process is voucher entry. Here are the applications that make up the voucher entry process. We just saw these on our task view a little bit ago too. List 04E is the vendor master maintenance process or role. Here are the applications a part of that. For a user to be breaking rule 04A, 04E, they must have one or more of the applications or UBEs from this list and one or more applications from the other list. Follow? So again, just because you have all 8, 9, 10 of these applications, if you don't have one of these two here, you're not going to be breaking this rule. There's no harm in giving you a self-sustaining business process of voucher entry. That's not going to do there's no harm in the system. There's no segregation of duties issue with giving you a single business process. It's when you have multiple business processes that you can do harmful things in the system. So set up a fictitious supplier or vendor and start booking vouchers to them. Now, I know there's other processes, payments and check and all of that stuff, but this is the start. And this is something that could potentially harm the business from a financial standpoint significantly. So this is something that All Out has deemed and created to say this needs to be monitored. This is one of the 130-ish rules that they have defined in their SOD matrix. So what does the reporting output look like? So for instance, we've got our rules set up. We've got our lists mapped to our all of our business processes, our roles, our access, our applications. And we run an SOD report over, let's say, for instance, my test user test KG. What are we going to see and what when we see it, what does it mean to us? For instance, the output here, user in violation, it's going to show us who the user is. It's going to show the rule being violated here. It's going to show the applications causing the violation here. And here's the list showing you, here's the list access for the applications. So 04A, I've got access via this role, 04BCH, to these three. 04 control is granting me access to these two, which is the other side of the list. Having both of these roles assigned to test KG presents or makes test KG in violation of rule 04A, 04E. So you're thinking, well, how do we remedy this? What would we do at this point? Well, I'm giving you a very nice, clean example of SOD issue in a process-based model. So we're going to stick there. Job-based can be very confusing. So we'll stick in a process-based. What do I have to do to solve this issue? there's two things. You can change the security in one of these roles to not have full access. But my guess is, since we're in process-based roles, that O4 control needs full access to these. And O4 VCH needs full access to these voucher entry related applications. So we can't change security in our roles. The next thing is, can we remove one of these roles from the user test KG? So was O4 control mistakenly assigned to test KG, and he really does not handle supplier master. He only needs to inquire on it. We meant to give him the O4 inquiries role, not O4 control. Okay, remove O4 control. And now that I don't have full access to or access to these two applications at all, now that violation goes away. This user is no longer in violation of this particular role. Or vice versa. Let's say voucher entry was not supposed to be assigned and voucher or O4 control was. Remove O4 VCH ENT. So option one, remove one of the roles. Option two is, let's say department small, AP department small, and this happens a lot, and you do not have the flexibility to remove either of these roles from this user. They have to have the functionality. Well, you enter a mitigation. So meaning we will mitigate this saying, yes, I know company GSI acknowledges that test KG has to have these two roles assigned at all times because these are part of his daily/weekly job duties. There's nothing we can do about that. We will apply a mitigation saying we know this and accept this, and this will continue showing up on our SOD report, but it will have the manual mitigation that the business says we accept this. Those are really your two options. Again, you can go the route of changing security, but changing security is not just as easy as removing records from roles. You don't know who you're affecting and what you're affecting in the system after that. So options really are removing the role from the user or mitigating the violation. And the last compliance aspect using a tool set is, and I think this is one of the more cool things that AOS designed as well, is preventative SOD. So you've got your SOD matrix, you know which roles, you've got it uploaded, you know which roles are conflicting with other roles and causing SOD rule violations. You've got your reporting in place, and let's say you run reports every, you start it, we go through a security project, get you compliant, and fix all of your issues by Q1, end of Q1. At the end of Q2, so in I think what, June, is that right? End of June, you need to run a new SOD report. If you don't have preventative SOD set up, you're going to have, well, most likely, potentially anyway, if you've made role changes, access changes, you will have new SOD violations pop up. Well, preventative SOD is just what it reads. It prevents the SOD violation from happening in the forefront. So the example I just gave you, run it in Q2, now you're finding out for the last 3 months that you've had or potentially, 3 months, 1 month, 2 months, however many days in that quarter, that this user has been able to or has been in violation of this particular rule or rules for SOD. Here it says preventative SOD stops you from even assigning those roles ahead of time. So what I mean is you match the roles that cause your level 3 violations. For instance, keeping with our voucher entry and supplier master example, we would set up in the system anywhere that O4 VCH and O4 control were to be assigned to each other. So let's back up on our example here. Test KG is assigned O4 VCH. Let's say, for instance, he does not have O4 control yet, but the request comes into IT. Hey, test KG, we need to assign O4 control. He needs to now take over supplier master records as well. Okay, so IT goes into JD Edwards, all out security, and goes to role relationships and tries to assign O4 control. When they go to update the database, one of two things will happen. They will either get a soft warning or a hard stop. A soft warning will say, it'll be an error message that pops or warning message that pops up and says, hold on, you've deemed or set up that these two roles prevent a level 3 violation, which is the highest, SOD violation in the system. Are you sure you want to proceed? At that point with a soft warning, you can click OK, the additional OK, and you will assign the role. A hard stop will say, hold on, you're going to need something else to proceed here. You don't get to just click OK. I need a signed document. I need a signature. I need a PDF attached. I need some sort of attachment to go along with this particular role assignment record, because this will grant this user a level 3 violation. And at that point, if you want to proceed, you may. But if not, then you go back to the management, the business, the manager, and say, by adding this role, he already has voucher entry. By adding O4 control, we're going to be in violation. This user will be in violation of a level 3 rule. Is this still acceptable? Is this valid access request? If it is, provide the documentation and move through the hard stop. If it's not, then you already have the framework where you're not just adding a role and it's talked about, and yep, you know what, test KG, you're not going to get O4 control. We can't have you with that level of access. So it negates the potential harm and risk of users having more access, or level 3 violation, even level 2, any violation, rule violation that you've set up for any amount of time. So again, let's say you run SOD reports once a year. 2 days after you run it and submit it to your user, you don't have preventative SOD set up. O4 control is assigned to test KG, and you're not going to run SOD reports for another, 360 days, give or take. Well, in those 360 days, I'm going to be able to perform the business risk that is associated with this violation. So again, preventative SOD, very cool, very easy to set up if you have the tool set and you have the SOD matrix in place. So something to definitely think about. I love All Out Security. Been working with it for about 6.5, 7 years, almost my full tenure here at GSI. So, you know, great tool. It makes life easier in the IT and security world, just significantly easier. So if there's any questions there, and honestly, any questions regarding anything that you've heard today, then by all means, please reach out. I'd be happy to take a phone call, answer some emails, you know, maybe help you through some security pain points that may be lingering for you guys. Again, touch on anything today that maybe just didn't get enough to go in depth on. So anything at all, do not hesitate. By all means, reach out. Would love to help. All right. On that note, thank you, Brooke, and we will proceed with some questions and answers.